hear and see us?
I'm here.
Perfect.
Go Huskers.
I'm not. You are all the way at the bottom and you're up at the top. Okay. You can see and hear us now, Dr. Jones?
Thank you.
Thank you. I see also some of our panelists as well
Okay.
for the 7 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Victor Talon is on here as well.
Okay.
And so is Scott Charpentier.
I'm here.
Great.
Okay. And then who else are we meeting?
Who's
Dave-
that?
David is here.
Just click down.
Are we ready, or I'll just wait till you tell me?
I'm just doing a triple count.
Mr. Talon.
Looks like everyone is here.
Okay.
We're set now.
Okay. So it looks like we have everybody that we need, so I'm going to call the town board meeting to order for April 13th, 2020 at 5:04 p.m. Miss Eicher, will you please take roll call?
Miles Baker,
Here.
Barry Wilson,
Here.
Ken Bennett,
Here.
Paul Ridemeyer,
Here.
Tom Jones,
Here.
David Shockley,
Here.
Here. We do have a flag in front of us, so we're going to rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
which
it stands,
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our next item is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration. Are there any items the board would like to bring up for consideration? If not, I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Madam Mayor, this is Paul Ridemeyer, Windsor Town Board. I move that we approve the agenda as presented this evening. This is very well said.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mr. Wilson.
I do see a comment or a question from Mr. McCarger.
That's right. Madam Mayor, I understand that we have an issue with the notice for a public hearing that has us scheduled for 7 o'clock for items C 1 through 4. Does it make sense to push those to the bottom of the agenda at this point, or is it the desire of the board to postpone them when we get to them?
I think what we need, I don't think we're gonna be in this meeting till 7 o'clock. So I think pushing them to the bottom, we'd still would have to postpone. So my recommendation, and I talked to our town manager, is to postpone them until 7 o'clock. When and do we do that when we get to them, or as part of the agenda now, Mr. McCarver?
Yeah, Ian, I think what
That's
we,
my question.
I think what we talked about, Ian, what I talked to the mayor about is maybe just taking the agenda out of order. And then, so we would start out with agenda C5 when we get to the board action. To the extent that we're done with that discussion and communications and it's not yet 7 p.m., at that point we will just take a recess and re-adjourn at 7 to take items C1 through C4.
Okay, so it sounds like we won't entertain a motion at this time to modify the agenda, but when we get to those items, there will be a request to postpone them or take things out of order.
Yes, sir.
Correct.
Mr. Soslowski, you have a comment or question?
That was going to be my question. I was going to amend the motion to move these items now, but I guess we'll do it later.
Okay. Okay, if there are no further comments, we do have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mr. Wilson to approve the agenda as presented. I guess all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Okay, the agenda is approved as presented unanimously. Our next item is a proclamation, an Arbor Day proclamation. Whereas 148 years ago, J. Sterling Morton proposed a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday called Arbor Day is now observed throughout the United States and the world, and whereas this being the 39th year the town of Windsor, Colorado has been awarded the Tree City USA Award, and whereas trees can reduce erosion, cut energy bills, clean the air, produce oxygen, provide habitat for wildlife, and are a renewable resource giving us fuel, lumber, and numerous wood products. And whereas trees enhance the value of our community and are a source of joy and beauty. Now therefore I, Christy Melendez, Mayor of the town of Windsor, Colorado, do hereby proclaim April 17th, 2020 as Arbor Day in the town of Windsor, Colorado. And I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect and plant trees for this and future generations. Moving on to item 5, board liaison reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board and Historic Preservation Commission.
I have no update, but thank you for the proclamation for the Tree Board for Arbor Day.
Town Board Member Wilson, Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Board, Poudre River Trail Corridor.
I have no updates, Madam Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, Water and Sewer Board.
No updates at this time, Madam Mayor.
Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
Madam Mayor, I do not have an update as the Chamber of Commerce has not met since our last board meeting.
Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority, Great Western Trail Authority.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Windsor Housing Authority did not meet in March, and I have not heard anything about an April meeting, whether it will be canceled or whether it will be a Zoom meeting, but I haven't received any notification yet. Great Western Trail Authority had a bid opening on April 2nd for the 5.5 miles of trail. The bid has been awarded to L4 Environmental of Greeley. They came in under budget, which I'm happy to say. They have some paperwork to get CDOT approval, but assuming everything goes okay there, then we'll give them a notice to proceed on April 23rd and hopefully start the project in May.
Okay,
And that's all I have.
wonderful, thank you. Town Board Member Sislowski, Clearview Library Board and Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. On the Planning Commission, they did hear a couple of items that were over to the board that we will be addressing tonight. Those are items 1 through 4 on the agenda. And as a reminder, I will have to read my disclosure statement when we do open those public hearings. Aside from, that's it on the planning. On the library board, I think this was the very last in-person meeting that I attended of any kind on March 26th. The group met, and one takes us back to what seems like a lifetime ago. They had the author of The Boy That Harnessed the Wind come and speak, an author presentation. They had almost 800 attending that talk back February 22nd. Very well attended, excellent program for the library. Our library is also undertaking hiring an architect to assist with designing or redesigning the interior of the building to see if there's a way to make space more efficient for the books, but also programming. The architect's walkthrough was conducted by someone carrying around a video camera on this day and age. So they are continuing to move forward on that, though of course it may be difficult because of the movement restrictions. And the library is also undertaking a staffing study that would look over the various salary adjustments and benefits. Although obviously with the state of the current economy, they've agreed to keep that study in place and discuss it in more detail a little further down the road. Finally, the library pretty much decided, the library board decided they would mirror the school district in terms of when they would be opening. So as long as you're hearing that Weld RE4 is closed, the library will be as well, with the caveat that if the school district, of course, closes through the rest of the school year, the library will have to separately decide when they reopen. Thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Sazowski,
I heard from Ann Kling that they're going to try to follow the governor's order and divest from the school district based on the summer break. So I think that if they haven't done that yet, that's their intent, to follow the state governor's order.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I have Downtown Development Authority. We are meeting by Zoom, via Zoom, this coming Wednesday at our regular 7:30 meeting time. North Front Range MPO, we did have our virtual meeting on April 2nd. A couple highlights out of that meeting is we did approve the multimodal options fund. If you'll recall, Windsor has a project in them that's coming out of that fund, so I'm happy to see that that's passed. We had an update on the North I-25 Segment 6. So Berthoud to Johnstown presented the I-25 Segment 6 project update, stating that the construction manager was very favorable delivery method for this project, and it's going to allow for construction to begin during design. And so that project is continuing to move forward. We did get a very comprehensive presentation on the US 34, US 85 interchange, sometimes known as Spaghetti Junction. So we looked at reconfiguration ideas, most commonly known, and cost. That comes down to, even in phases, that project would cost at an estimated $170 million. So I think they're looking at phases, and I don't know at what point in time any of that will ever come to fruition. But anyway, at least we know what some of those ideas might be and what the costs might become. Pooter Express update. So prior to them having to basically close that down, they reported that the Pooter Express was a relatively new service, but it had been doing and gaining some great ridership. In January, they had about 96 riders a day, February 108, and then in March up until the closure about 113. Again, expressed that it would take about 3 years to fully make sure that that mode of transit is brought to its maturity. But they liked what they were seeing so far and had heard lots of positive response from riders and ridership to date. So that kind of concludes the report that came out of the MPO last month. Moving on then to item 6. Jessica, do we have anybody from the public who wanted to indicate, public invited to be heard? So again, we're gonna move on, again letting folks know that as we move on in our agenda, if there's opportunity, especially when we come back and would be hearing, like the public hearing, you'll need to give notice that you want to be recognized, and so that we can make sure that we hear your comments and get your questions accordingly. So with that, we're going to move on to item B, which is the consent calendar. We have 5 items under the consent calendar this evening, and I would look for a motion to approve.
Madam Mayor, this is Paul Rindelmeyer. On board, I would move to approve consent calendar as presented this evening.
Okay, do we have a second?
Baker, second.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer and a second from Mr. Baker to approve the consent calendar as presented. All in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Hearing no nays, the consent calendar was approved unanimously. And so we'll move on to official board action under item C. Again, we have items 1, 2, 3, and 4 that we would like a motion to move to postpone those items 1 through 4 until 7 p.m. to meet the notice that was given accordingly. So do I need to?
Madam Mayor.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, this is Paul Rentmeyer, the Windsor Town Board, and I move items
C 1, 2, 3, and 4 to 7 o'clock this evening for the resumption of our town board meeting.
Second by Board Member Jones.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer and a second from Doc Jones to move items 1 through 4 until 7 p.m. this evening to coincide with our public notice. Is there any other discussion or comments relating to that? Mr. McCarter, anything else we need to chat about?
No, Madam Mayor, I think it's clear that what we're doing is postponing. That means that this meeting will remain convened, but just go into recess if we don't have business right up to 7 o'clock.
Okay. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed? So items 1 through 4 will be coming back to
At 7 p.m. this evening. Moving on then to item 5, resolution number 2020-29, a resolution approving and accepting the Town of Windsor 2020 Parks, Recreation, and Culture Strategic Plan legislative action. Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you see the screen?
I can't, and also the Steelers flag.
That's the most important screen behind me. So thank you, Mayor, Board. I wanted to, Eric Lucas, Public Service Director. Tonight before you is a resolution accepting the very first Parks, Rec, and Culture Department strategic plan. As you know, the department, our consultant, Pros Consulting out of Indianapolis, spent a lot of time and over the last year plus developing this plan, meeting with staff, board, Parks, Rec, and Culture Board, Advisory Board, and in the community. So you probably recall back on March 2nd, Neely Bott from Pros presented this draft plan to you at your work session back in March. From all accounts, I felt like the board overall liked the plan. I was really pleased with the thoroughness of it. When we got to the big move section, there were some questions. So we've kind of taken some time and then obviously been delayed by COVID to go back and review that portion of the plan. So I'll share with you those results tonight. You've seen this slideshow before, so I'm gonna go through it fairly quickly. I've modified it just slightly. So if you have questions along the way, please feel free to stop me. I'll be happy to answer any questions throughout or when we get to the end. And then I see that Victor and Scott are on the line here. I'm happy to meet with you all offline to get more in depth and kind of go through the whole process a little more than obviously the 200 and some page document that you have in your packet. So with that, we'll go to the next screen. There we go. As I stated, we started back, I believe it was in April of 2019, kind of where were we then and kind of what's the department been doing in that last year, and really looking at a really thorough glance from the consulting firm at all of our sites, visited all of our parks, all of our facilities, looked at all of our programs, did a really thorough analysis there. benchmarked against some communities across the country and in Colorado that you'll see later. Did a funding analysis, looked at our level of standards, and then also GIS. And then once they kind of got that baseline of where's Windsor Parks, Rec, and Culture Department now, spent some time figuring out from the public, why do they recreate in Windsor? What do they like? What could we improve on? And what do they want for the future? And ultimately deciding, what does Windsor want to be in the future? This plan kind of gets us out to 5 years. As you've all witnessed, we're changing very rapidly in terms of population. And, in the next 5 years, we're going to be, possibly 40, 50,000 people now as we sit here at 34,000. So this strategic plan really is a kind of our guidebook for the department and the town to consider changes, or things to implement, things to consider in the future as we continue to deal with the growth that we're facing. So just a quick overview of some of the things that they looked at. So they looked at our programs. What they found was that the department is really well-rounded. We've got lots of programs, very high participation rate, not very pretty low cancellation rates. People really get a lot of information from our activity guide, social media, our website. And we have some programs such as swimming, some exercise classes such as cycling, that we have wait lists that are heavily used. But overall, we have a really well-rounded rec program offering to the community. Some things that we could do better at in terms of programming, obviously getting CAPRA certification or accredited through NRPA, evaluating our core programs. And I can tell you that it's been interesting. There's some silver linings that have come out of COVID, is it forced us, as we began to look at some budget reductions, to recommend to Shane and the town board. Evaluating our core programs was something we went and looked at and said, hey, before we cut things, let's focus really quickly and know what our core is. So for example, some things that we recognized weren't core and got removed was, mud volleyball. One-day event doesn't really generate a ton of money, but it takes a lot of staff effort during Harvest Festival when we're already exhausted, but really doesn't form the core of what we do. So by evaluating our core programs, we were able to make some informed decisions as opposed to just making cuts, without some education behind it. Also, they identified that we could do a lot better job in improvement areas such as working with our cultural resources, nature and outdoor programs, and then utilizing volunteers to run programs or run volunteer events, and some other things that you can see on the screen here. They also looked at all of our sites, and I think you heard Nile and Phil also spoke that night back in March. We have an amazing park system here in Windsor. It's in really, really good shape, well-rounded, lots of activities no matter what park you go to, playgrounds that have great sightline visibility, so parents can see what their kids are doing and don't necessarily have to be right there with them. Playgrounds that also offer a lot of different opportunities for engagement. And then I can tell you they toured this facility that I'm sitting in here, the public service campus, that includes the expansion of parks maintenance facility, or I shouldn't say expansion, the building and expansion of the park maintenance facility, and then the museum collections facility. And the consultant would put this facility up against any in the nation. We're really privileged to be able to work out of here. And once COVID's gone, I hope to have everybody out here, including the public, to do a ribbon cutting and tour of this wonderful facility. So thank you for that, because it made their slideshow, and I can tell you that they were really impressed by what we've built. Some areas for improvement is just doing master plans of all of our parks, understanding, as they begin to age and things age out, and how does the demographics of Windsor change and the neighborhoods change, and what do they want to see in a replacement of a park. Updating some aging playgrounds and repairing surfaces. So some that jump to mind at me is, Boardwalk Park playground is only about 8 years old, but it is so used, it won't make the 15-year lifespan that normal playgrounds do. So that was one that they'd called out. Covenant Park, we have some safety surfacing improvements that we could do there. continuing, as we continue to grow, don't spend so much money on activity guide things, but do more digital, because things are rapidly changing. And we've also seen that happen with the COVID issue that we're having. Increase access to water recreation resources, and then enhancing trails and those kind of things. There's some areas that we can improve our current trail system in terms of maintenance, as well as you'll see later and you've seen before, the public wants more trails open space access. They looked at some benchmarks. So these are communities that you see on the screen right here that we kind of want to emulate in some sort of way and fashion. The big thing that jumps out at you on this screen is the majority, with the exception of Golden, are bigger than Windsor is today. So they've gone through growth. They know what it's like to grow, and they've kind of felt those growing pains as we're feeling now as a department and as a community. So the size or population is the big thing. And then you'll notice that every one of them have achieved CAPRA accreditation and also an NRPA gold medal winner. I think you'll recall, and I would concur with him, we have been gold medal finalists 2 out of the last 3 years. We really, quite frankly, are already a gold medal department. We just haven't won the award yet. Tara just finished last Friday and submitted for the 2020 award, so our fingers are crossed. In terms of benchmarking against our park system, we kind of fall in the middle, but we are the highest in terms of percentage of park acres that are developed, which is really good, but that will begin to decline over time as our population increases. We have, and just as a quick reminder, we have 5 parks still kind of on our docket to build that we're aware of. And so that's Jacoby Farm, Wayne Miller, Harmony Ridge. So those are neighborhood parks. And then Takankala and Lebu, which are larger community parks. So we're in a good position right now, but as we begin to creep up on 50,000, that number is going to change. And then if we happen to go to 60, 70,000 population, obviously that number begins to dramatically decrease in terms of percentage of acres of parkland per resident. And then trails. Again, we're doing really, really well here, especially if you look at the national best practice. The thing to keep in mind here is not only population, but we live in Colorado and people love the outdoors. They love trails and open space. So to say that we don't need to do anything more because of a national best practice standard that you see at the bottom of that slide would be a mistake. As you'll see in the statistically valid survey, trails, open space, connectivity ranks 1, 2, 3 on almost every resident's mind in terms of what they want. They want more. So it's an interesting statistic to see where we fall against other community members, but at the same time, our residents are asking us for more. And then indoor rec space, again, similar to the trails, but we rank a little lower here, but I think it's got a lot to do with population size, but we are still significantly above national best practice. So I think the message here is we're doing good as we sit today. But as you know, we're beginning to feel those growing pains of capacity at our current rec center. Last year, 406,000 people. Really over the last 3 years, we've been right around the 400,000 people through the front door statistically every year annually. So what that tells us is, and you see that later on, in some of the surveys that we get back from the residents, is that we're doing good now, but as Windsor grows to 40, 50,000 population, indoor rec space is going to become a really hot commodity. And so, as you see later, one of the recommendations is to begin to explore that, because we'd rather be thinking ahead and be a little more proactive in terms of indoor space versus reactive when all of a sudden we're beyond capacity and don't have the ability to go find or create that space. And so then, and you've seen these slides, I trimmed it down a little bit. They did a statistically valid survey. Goal was 375 responses, got 400. So that created based on the survey results, got 95% level of confidence. So really, really happy with these results. And they really do guide us in terms of a lot of what we'll do moving forward. So I'll go through these to share with you. So, people were asked, statements like, what is the benefits of having a park and recreation system here in Windsor? 93% said makes Windsor a more desirable place to live. I can tell you, and you've seen the statistics that I've passed on from Wade and the trails, during COVID, when we see our trail system use at Boardwalk Park, for example, go from 7,000 in the month of March to 17,000. Can you imagine if people if you lived in the community, didn't have trails and park system like we do here in Windsor, where are they going to walk? Where are they going to recreate to kind of pass the time, but also stay healthy and not go super stir crazy, just locked in their house? 86% of people want to see us preserve open space and protect environment. So very important there. Items that people are most willing to fund with tax dollars. 44% want us to spend dollars on trails and connectivity, 39% acquisition of open space, 25% upgrade the current trails that we have. So again, you can see trails, open space. 22% is outdoor pool, and 20% is develop new community recreation centers. Again, that comes from capacity issues that I'm speculating that those residents, those users are beginning to feel in the current rec center. How would they like to see us fund supporting those items? User fees, almost 50%, and a local sales tax increase. So kind of those are the top. The rest of them really drop off from there. And then one of the questions was if they gave every resident or every respondent here $100 for Parks and Recreation, how would they spend it? 26% basically maintain what you got. 25% is construct or acquire open space and trails. 18% goes to indoor facility space in some form. And then 16% is for outdoor facility space, whether that's athletics or parks. And then it's interesting too, if you go back and look at this current year budget, and I know we've made some changes given COVID, but where would people like us to invest in terms of the future for rec facilities? The top 10, Riverwalk, then you see a bunch of trails, open space, outdoor habitat, splash park, community center, greenways, water access, and a botanical garden, arboretum. And if you look back through our CIP budget this year, we address almost every one of those in some form or fashion in the 2020 budget. So it's listening to what the residents want, listening to what they're asking for here in Windsor. And then in terms of programs that they want to see, and we've all laughed and joked about the top one here, but farmers market really came out. People want to have a farmers market, even though we already have one. So we just need to do a better job when we come back out of COVID to market the out of our farmers market, so people recognize that we do have one. And then things like adult fitness and wellness. People already do a lot of recreation here in Windsor, but they want more. Special events are very popular here, and they want some more there, as well as outdoor and nature-based type of programs. So then this next piece, and if I reference for you, it kind of starts on page 174. That really is the strategic recommendations that came out of the plan. And so how this all evolved was the consultant came to us and said, hey, here's the results, kind of digest them from what they'd learned, what the survey said, what all the one-on-one meetings or the group meetings had said, and kind of let that marinate a little bit with us and with them as they were kind of figuring out what do we do with all this information. And so we spent some significant time digesting and then talking with them and talking with staff through all of the information to come up with our core
And Eric,
mission, and then the big moves.
hey, Eric.
Yes.
Hey, Eric?
Yes.
I just wanted the board to know, so when Eric says 174, he's talking about in the
In
plan.
your packet, that's page 270.
Okay, thanks.
So, yep, you bet.
We spent a lot of time here, several days with the large group of staff and the consultant to work through these next few slides that I'll show you: vision, mission, and values, but then also the big moves. But if you have time, or if you haven't had the time, I can assure you that throughout the plan and even at the end beyond this section here, there are tons and tons of areas for staff to work on, whether that is to maintain, improve, or do something totally different throughout the plan. So when we get to the big move section, just remember that the results of the plan, those big moves really are kind of the themes that came out and part of how we will address it. It's not everything. It's not the end all be all, because there are lots of recommendations throughout this plan. But so our core values that came out was exceptional customer experience, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll tell you, we were one of the first in the nation to adopt this as a core value. Innovation, sustainability, and fun. And then our vision is to be the national leader in exceptional recreation experiences. And our mission is to build community. And so again, here, these next big moves, this up until this point, last time when Neely presented, I felt like, and obviously correct me if my perception is mistaken, the board seemed to be really on the same page with the consultant, with staff in terms of the plan to this point. But there were, on the next slide, there was a bullet that kind of threw folks a little bit. Know that, again, these are the themes that kind of came out, but there's a lot of other changes and things that we can adopt behind all of these themes. But at the same time, I spent some time discussing with Neela and Phil the language here, the intent, so that you'll see that change on this next slide. So obviously, my expectation is, this is a great area for us to pause and discuss if you'd like, or we can conclude. I got one more slide after this one. But the big moves that are on that 174 that I mentioned page, enhanced culture of customer service excellence. They already believe, and I would concur with them within the department, and I would argue even within the whole town, even though they weren't studying the whole town, we have excellent customer service. But in order to maintain that, especially as we grow and our demands of, from the public to try to meet all these different demands that people want as we grow from 34 to 50, 60, 70,000 people, is we must be diligent in training and continuing to ensure that our employees provide that excellent customer service training. And so a lot of that is training and giving them different experiences and guidelines. And so there's a lot to do to not only enhance, but just maintain our great customer service that we have today. This next one is where the wording changed. So it's explore the expansion of indoor recreation spaces that complements our current rec center. So this is really saying, hey, you're good now. It goes back to that previous slide that I showed you in terms of benchmarking. You're good now as we sit today, but as Windsor grows, you're already beginning to feel a capacity issue. You really should consider exploring what else do you need in this community to meet their indoor needs for recreation. And that could be a variety of things. It could be a field house, could be a culture center, could be arts facility, could be some other ideas that are out there. So this really is just saying, hey, you really should consider this, because as you grow and become 50,000 population, you're probably going to feel a lot of capacity issues in the current building. So that's that one. And then this next bullet wasn't on the slideshow back in March, but we heard from the board. The consultant felt, and I would agree with him, that this piece was within the plan, but not necessarily called out as a big move. Probably an oversight on our part as a team, but is explore the acquisition of open space. Again, this goes back to one of those other slides that I showed you. Protect and preserve Windsor's small town appeal and maintain community buffers. It is important. It jumps out at us when you look at what people want. They want trails, they want connectivity, they want open space, they want buffers so that when you drive from Windsor to Loveland or over to Severance or Timnath, that you know that you've left one community and entered another. And so they want to make sure that we maintain that small town feel by acquisition of open space. One of our challenges that will come out of that, and really is the bullet, 2 bullets down, really is funding, is how do we pay for all of that? And so that's a big challenge that we're going to have when it comes to acquisition of open space. Focus on planning and executing It goes to, as you grow, those challenges really are going to pop up even more and more. So we need to master plan what the future looks like in terms of our park system, focus on our plans that we already have for major functions such as special events, understand our core services and have those game plans in place so that we can implement those kind of things. So really executing the plan and knowing, where we are today as we sit in 2020 and how we're going to get to 25 or get to 2030. Funding is a huge one, and obviously they've recommended that we start a foundation. Those we kind of slowed down with COVID, but we were, as you heard back in March from Neelay and staff, we were moving right along on the creation of a foundation. But identifying dedicated funding sources for all of what Windsor's Park Rec and Culture Department will want to become in the future is critical. Relying on tax dollars is not going to be able to provide the dollar amount that we'll require to build our whole system and then replace things as they age out and kind of all the demands that will come at us. And lastly, technology, integrating it into all aspects of operations. I already mentioned the trail counter, but it's a great example of, as technology comes forward, we should be evaluating it and determine whether it pays a useful resource for us. The eco counters have done that. I've been here almost 5 years now, brought that idea with me. And we've now I think we started out with 1 or 2 in the first year, and we now have about 10 in our system. But it gives us the data to know that, hey, there's 17,000 people that have walked around the lake in the month of March. That's crazy. And so that impact is maintenance such as trails, spacing of people as they walk through this crisis that we're in. So it's just an example of utilizing technology to help make decisions as we move forward as a community and as a department. So with that, staff's recommendation is requesting that you approve the resolution to accept the strategic plan. If you do that tonight, I will let pros know tomorrow, and they'll finalize the plan and provide us digital and bound copies. And then we as a staff will begin to build out the plan in the Invisio software. That kind of section of the town strategic plan is sitting there. PD's got one, Public Works is working on one right now, the TMP's on there. So we'll begin to build that out. So with that, I can answer any questions that you might have. Again, my recommendation is that you approve the resolution to accept the strategic plan.
Okay, do you see some, Jessica? Okay, Mr. Sislowski, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I do. And Eric, you're right. In terms of that slide with the big moves, we all sort of had a reaction to it at the town board meeting when you first presented the draft. And I think it still seems to miss a little bit. So for instance, the word trail doesn't appear anywhere on that big move slide. And if I remember back from your prior slides and data points, it was a very big issue for the residents. And my fear is if we don't capture what the data is suggest is important to residents in that big move slide, you're going to start developing your short-term strategies and your annual and year-to-year budgets and work scopes based off of this slide. And what's missing on here, at least for sure, is trails.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm quite certain I can add that word if the board is so inclined. I will tell you, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I did make a note for myself to an example of additional strategic moves or decisions that we need to be looking at, strategies. If you turn to page 175, it talks about some other recommendations. And trails are in there, but I get your point, and I don't think that that's an issue if the board's so inclined. I can definitely make that say, explore the acquisition of trails and open space.
A combination, I think, of acquisition, also, developing, at least with a degree of certainty for us, a master plan for all the trails now or over the next 10 years might be, so that we either know where the trails are going in the next coming years, but also make sure we reserve the rights of way as we're approving new projects, so that all of these things over time will connect. I mean, I think that's really step one. And haven't seen that, and I don't see that as one of the priorities on your big moves table.
Okay.
But it's just
Mr.
me.
Bennett, you have a comment or question?
Yes, I had two, and now, thanks to Mr. Solosky, I have three. First of all, I agree with Mr. Solosky that the trails ought to be included on part of that number 3 bullet regarding open space and trails. Second comment I had was regarding the indoor recreation space. I think that much better communicates two concepts. One, that we're reaching capacity issues with the present facility, but it also communicates the idea of flexibility. That was something I talked about. So, I'm supporting that. On the explore and acquisition of open space, and that would include trails. Plans are great, but they're only good if we put them into operation. And so if we're serious about that, I think we've got to take some serious looks at our land use maps and look at our zoning and possibly even look at regional partnerships with other communities on those things. So those are my comments.
I would concur with you. I think those the latter that you just said in terms of land use and regional partnerships. So those are great strategies for us to solve the challenge that's before us in terms of acquisition and building trails and open space.
Any other questions or comments? She's not seeing anything. So
I want to make a I want to make a comment then, and my comment really is not for this current board, but it's for the future board that's coming, because all of this was prepared before we had our national disaster and issue, and before we had unprecedented times before us. And so I would say to the current board members that are going to be on here and future board members coming, to be prepared, because we need to consider that there's going to be huge changes coming, more stricter considerations within the budget that are going to have to be taken a look at. We've already made some budget reductions, but based on what I'm hearing in terms of 40 to 50% potential drop in property values, 50% drop that we're preparing for in retail sales tax. I think there's going to have to be, this next board is going to be looking at the budget every quarter and going to have to be making changes and be prepared to make changes. And I think with that, that means that even if this strategic plan is approved, I think everybody needs to be prepared that there might have to still be times when some of these projects and ideas might have to actually be delayed or actually maybe be terminated as we come to as the board has to come to wrestle with important decisions and to deliver basic needs and services to our community and residents, which is number one. With all due respect, this department does a wonderful, great job for all of us, but it's also a department that has a huge, huge budget. And a lot of these things that are in this budget not only come in to create these programs and services, but then there's a huge cost for maintenance in the future. And yes, we have our citizenry to date who has told us to move on to this projection because they value outdoor, they value the amenities, they value all these recreational opportunities. But again, even at this time when we did the survey, that was when we had one of the lowest unemployment rates ever in the history, and now we're faced with seeing one of the highest employment rates that we will have ever noted probably in our country, or at least in a very, very long time. And so I think that folks, as we move forward, as we're just looking to provide basic needs and services, that folks, even if we were to ask those same questions, might re-identify what is really important to them. So I'm just cautioning everybody that even though we accept the strategic plan, that everybody needs to maybe rethink this. I think that a lot of these things need to be looked at every single year until we at least get some stability back into a budget, which I'm hearing won't even return until maybe 2023, 2024. So that we don't get ourselves, so that we can maintain, all of the key core things that I think our citizens look to us for. So again, I'm just making some caution. I'm not suggesting that, we don't approve this, only that I think the next the future board and, you know, actually the future months ahead are gonna be dealt with, I think, a lot of really important key decisions to be made. And there's gonna be probably more cuts, more things that this board's in the future is gonna have to look at. And so you need to keep all of this in mind, because again, it's gonna be about prioritizing what's truly important. And is it the infrastructure? Is it safety, infrastructure, roads and water? Is that what becomes the ultimate priority to this community? And, you know, and in terms of all these other things that we have to wrestle with. So with that, is there a motion to approve? I guess this is coming before us in the terms of a resolution. Is there a motion to approve Resolution 2020-29?
Madam Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
I move that we approve resolution number 2020-29.
Okay.
This is Barry Wilson. I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett with a second from Mr. Wilson. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? And the resolution carries unanimously. Moving on to item 6, resolution number 2020-30. A resolution ordering a public hearing on the petition for formation of the Future Legend Sports Park Business Improvement District. So are we opening a public hearing or ordering a public hearing?
Madam Mayor.
Okay, Mr. McCarter, can you, okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is Ian McCarter, Town Attorney. Thank you. What's before you tonight is something required by statute. It requires that we order a public hearing. So the form in which we're doing that is in a resolution. And so that's why it's presented to you tonight as a resolution. It identifies the date, April 27th, the time and location. I would say that when the matter comes before you, then all of your questions will be answered. We will have the applicant's attorney on hand. We will have other representatives of the applicant, but we'll also have Carolyn Steffel, your appointed special district counsel, here on the 27th to answer any questions about the formation of a business improvement district, the function of a business improvement district, and the governance of a business improvement district. So what's before you tonight is a very, very first step, which is scheduling the public hearing. And at the public hearing, the applicant will be expected to put the evidence on in support of their petition. I do have some information for you if anyone wants to know more about the Future Legends Business Improvement District, but the simple task before you tonight is to approve this resolution scheduling the public hearing.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments with this resolution? If not, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, on the town board, I move that we approve resolution number 2020-30.
Okay, is there a second?
Madam Mayor, I second that motion.
Okay, I heard a motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett approving resolution number 2020-30. Have you seen anybody who wants to make any comment? If not, okay, all in favor signify with aye to approve it.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we are approving that public hearing for the 27th. Moving on then to item 7, a finance report for December 2019 from Mr. Moyer.
Yes, thank you, madam. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. In your packet is the December 2019 financial report. You can see that the format that it is in is a little different than what we had been doing in
months past. The information is still basically the same, though we did a few things, and it made the report itself a little bit longer. So that being said, and we are not in person, I will not go through page by page, but there are a few items that I wanted to highlight that, and then of course questions if you have any. As we had been reporting all year in 2019, the sales tax the retail tax collections were up quite a bit over the year before. As usual, it was our grocery stores, and last year we also started collecting some internet sales tax, so that helped quite a bit. We also talked quite a bit about the number of building permits, which in turn increased the amount of construction use tax that we collected, which was able to fund our CIP program. And we were able to do quite a few projects, which the schedule on the last page of this evening's report lists our biggest projects that we had last year. And you can see that the projects on the bottom of the page are 100% complete. It's quite a few projects get done in 1 year. Our guys do a great job of knocking that stuff out. And, it's really a team effort of everybody working together, working with Safe Belt, keeping projects moving, and everything involved with projects. The other part of that is near the top of the page there, you can see we also carried over a few projects into 2020 that we did not have time to get to last year for one reason or another, but we are planning to do them here in 2020. So the 2019, and I apologize, it's taken a while for us to get the 2019 together. We were working on the annual audit for 2019 and kind of put this on the second burner here, but that is before you there tonight. And I will answer any questions, but before I go to that, in my report on Friday, I have mentioned something about the first quarter of 2020 and the sales tax. And as I suspected, the first quarter of 2020 was up quite a bit over the first quarter of 2019. Now, before we get too excited about that, we want to keep in mind that all of our businesses were the collections in March were for sales through February, and most of our businesses, if not all of them, were open and operating through February. Now, what happened in March, we all know, with the restaurants and whatnot, is quite a different story. So what I think the real indicator for the rest of our year will be this report here in April, which will include sales for March as well as quarterly filers for the first quarter of 2020. So be interested to put that out as soon as I get something. I will let you know. Outside of that, that is my report for this evening, and I would answer any questions.
Okay.
Have any questions for Dean? Have you seen anything? Okay. Thank you, Dean. Good luck with you as you have to wrestle through your next report.
I do have one comment not on the finance report, and it's from Ian.
Okay.
Mr. McCarger?
This is not on the finance report, but it matter the motion that you just approved a moment ago, setting the public hearing. I just looked at that resolution again, and it schedules the public hearing for 7 p.m. on April 27th. I think in order to avoid what we're doing tonight, that I need to request, and this is permitted under parliamentary procedure as long as it takes place during the meeting and not after the meeting adjourns, I need to have a motion to amend the resolution that we just approved to set that public hearing not at 7 p.m., but at 5 p.m.
5, yep.
I know that's awkward, but I think it's best we take care of it now rather than letting it happen again as we are tonight. So I need a motion to amend resolution number 2020-30, numbered paragraph 1, to change the time from 7 o'clock p.m. to 5 o'clock p.m.
Madam Mayor, I move to amend my previous motion for resolution number 2020-30 to a time-specific 5 p.m. on April 27th board meeting.
Did you say the time, Paul? Did you say the time?
Yes, I said 5 p.m. on April 27th.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
David? Okay. I heard a motion to amend that from Mr. Redemeyer, as a second from Mr. Kozlowski. All in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed nay. So that is amended unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Moving on then to future communications. Did you have anything else to communicate, Mr. Town Attorney?
No, I don't. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any communications, future communications or further communications from any town staff that are with us? Okay. Communications from our town manager?
Yes, Mayor, I just wanted to point out, we have the monthly board report in the packet. This report has captured really some disruptions from COVID-19. So following the board's discussion about the budget, we took that direction back and implemented that in the board report. So you may see some delays or some disruptions, and those are all really strictly budgetary changes that we've made this year. So those are reflected there, but I stand by to answer any additional questions from the board.
Okay. Seeing any questions or anything coming up?
Not quickly, maybe give them a minute.
Well, we're waiting to see if there's any questions on that. Are there any communications from town board? Okay. If not, we're not, of course, going to adjourn, but we're going to temporarily suspend this meeting, and we'll be back at 7 p.m. to go over item C, 1 through 4 at that time.
All please stay logged in. I'll make sure you're muted and we're muted on this end. I'll bring back up the screen about 10 till 7, just for a mic check.
Okay, so with that, we will see you all back here in about an hour.
And so Jesse, you sent this meeting invite to the mayor and I?
First item this evening under that is a public hearing for the final major subdivision, Rain Dance subdivision, the 8th filing. David Nelson, Martin Lind, the owner of the applicants, and Tom Siegel, the applicant's representative. It's going to be quasi-judicial. It looks like we have David Eisenbraun, who's senior planner, who's going to be making presentation. But first order of business would be I need to call for a motion to open the public hearing.
Before that, Mayor, David Sosowski, your hand is raised. Do you have a comment or question?
Yes, thanks. I guess real quick, I do notice the 4 items we have on the agenda, 2 of those are public hearing quasi-judicial matters. Those were matters that were referred to the board by the Planning Commission. And Madam Mayor, for the record, as to both of these public hearing matters, I need to point out that in my capacity as the town board liaison to the Planning Commission, I was present at the Planning Commission meeting during which these matters were previously presented. I need to state that my participation at the Planning Commission proceeding has in no way influenced me in my capacity as a town board member this evening. I'll make my decision and cast my vote this evening as to these 2 matters based solely on the evidence presented during the respective public hearings. Thank you.
Okay. And with that, is there a motion to open public hearing?
Madam Mayor, this is Paul Rennemeyer on the Windsor Town Board. I so move to open the public hearing.
This is Barry Wilson on the Windsor Town Board. I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Reddemeyer and a second to open public hearing. All in favor signify with aye.
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 Opposed? Public hearing is now open. So Mr. Eisenbraun, you can begin your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, town board members. Tonight, we're going to be presented with a double header from the Rain Dance folks. We've got 2 major subdivisions. First up, though, we will walk through the Rain Dance 8th filing. For those of you who do not know me, my name is David Eisenbraun, and like Madam Mayor had mentioned, I am a senior planner with the town. And with that, we'll get started. So with any major subdivision as part of our municipal code within Chapter 17, it's basically any time we're taking a parcel of land and dividing it into 6 or more parcels. That being said, it has been to Planning Commission and is now in front of you all for its final hearing. The site vicinity map is outlined, the site that we're going to be discussing tonight in blue. It's just north of New Liberty Road, east of Colorado Boulevard or Weld County Road 13. And is zoned Rain Dance PUD or Planned Unit Development Area. The filing 8 that we're specifically looking at right now is just a continuation on the overall Rain Dance Master Plan. This was also presented at the neighborhood meeting. And specifically, filing 8 is basically just looking at a smaller portion of the overall filing, which is about 600 acres. So with that, the plat characteristics that we're going to be looking at this evening is this major subdivision is consistent of 616 acres. 40 of those acres are developed and what you're seeing on your screen right now. Of that developed acreage, the overall density is 3.4 dwelling units per acre, with about 138 homes, 52 of them being a little bit smaller, 5,500 square foot lots, and 86 being 6,600 square foot lots. And they're all 1- and 2-story homes with attached garages, and they're all a detached single family product type. Overall, the improvements for filing 8 is really just the continuation of Cover Bridge Parkway with some landscape improvements, the continuation of the trail or a wider sidewalk along Cover Bridge Parkway. And due to the proximity of the second filing, which is just south of New Liberty Road, filing 8 did not need to build any additional pocket parks. However, they do have quite a bit of open space and other agricultural uses, as is been the theme throughout the rest of Rain Dance development, and those come out to about 3 acres. Overall, This application does follow and meet all our goals and objectives within the comprehensive plan, 5B being maintaining the character of the community while accommodating future growth that is fiscally and environmentally reasonable, as well as 5C, which is the residential areas framework, supporting diverse housing and residential neighborhoods to meet the needs of our varying family sizes, lifestyles, and income levels. As with all major subdivisions, a preliminary application was filed, as well as a neighborhood meeting back in December of 2019. Notifications for this final major subdivision were where the applicant had set out certified mailers on March 19th, as well as a notice on the town website, posting on the actual property, as well as a display in the Greeley Tribune. Were all done on the 20th, and also part of the reason why we're reconvening here at 7 instead of the earlier time. Our world was much different just a few weeks ago. With the 8th filing, there are just a handful of conditions that I would like to go through and kind of summarize for you all. These have been worked through with the developer in the town over the last couple weeks, and we all feel quite comfortable with them. So with that, I'll summarize the first 3. The first one being just the developers dedicating the necessary right-of-way and easements on their portion of Colorado Boulevard, so being the east side, sufficient for potential construction of a future 2-lane roundabout at the intersection of Colorado Boulevard and Cherry Blossom. That's kind of that main intersection point coming out of filing 8. The second bullet point is where the developer shall work with staff and prepare an elevated water tank design through a collaborative process that'll provide the adequate pressure for both emergency and water quantity for that south pressure zone that rain dances in, based on the town water or town system models that we are going to be preparing throughout 2020. The third bullet point is just the developer conveying a tract of land nearest the highest elevation, just north of New Liberty Road, where this water tank will be constructed. That tract of land shall be sufficient in size for that water tank, and any temporary or permanent easements for the construction, operation, and maintenance of that tank shall be dedicated to the town by the developer. One note that was not presented at the time of Planning Commission because it wasn't sorted out was this top bullet point where the town agrees to pay the developer its pro rata share of the water tower construction costs, as well as its pro rata share of the cash in lieu per acre price of $58,788 in exchange for the dedication of land. And that number is the current fee in lieu acre price that Parks and Rec currently uses. The next bullet point is the developer shall construct that elevated water tank by the end of 2022, unless there's considerable economic faults outside the control of the town or developer, and the town shall reimburse that developer its pro rata share within 30 days of construction acceptance of that water tower. Again, these pro rata shares are yet to be determined based on the modeling that the town will do. And finally, the last bullet point is upon dedication of the water tower, any real property to the town ownership and maintenance responsibility lies with the town being an asset. So any proposed exclusive rights to the water tower by the developer are going to be postponed until such a time when the design of the tower is ready to come forth and they're brought back to the town in writing. So with that being said, staff does recommend that the town board approve the final major subdivision as presented, subject to all remaining town board and staff comments and conditions being addressed. And lastly, staff requests that the following be entered into the record: application and supplemental materials, staff memorandum, and supporting documents, testimony received during the public hearing, and ultimately the approval of the major subdivision. And just as a reminder, here are the criteria that we use to review the major subdivision. With that, I will be happy to answer any questions, and I know we do have the applicant team on here as well.
Okay. Did the applicant...
Anything further they wanted to add at this time?
Please make sure you unmute your mic.
To answer questions.
Okay. And Jessica will make note if she's going to see if we have anybody who has questions.
Mr. Baker, you have a question or comment? Unmute, please.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Miles Baker, Town Board. I have a question on the water tower, what the purpose is, and is that something the town is requiring of the developer?
So the town is not requiring it at this juncture. It's something that they're going to flesh out the further details once they do all of the system modeling. Based on kind of preliminary build out projections, it's not needed right now, but it could be needed in the future. So it is something that the town will need at some point in time. They're just trying to determine exactly when and at what point. But if, Martin, if you have any more comments or Doug, any more details you want to share to help clarify that, please feel free.
I think this is Martin. I think it's a deal where there's engineering yet in progress to define. But I think what we do know is that we have the optimal area for that. So the town is doing an abundance of caution to make sure that when we bring these plats in, that we preserve that opportunity. My engineers are confident that the water tower is a fantastic extra amenity to have to any water system. You have water stored higher, which you can pump up there during lower utility cost time. If you have a system-wide electrical problem and you can't pump, you have that extra storage up higher. So there's a whole kinds of reasons to have it. We as a developer are not requesting this. The town has made this request. So we want to accommodate that. We've accommodated a place to put it. And we just happen to be in that certain area that it's exactly right to address this issue right now. So we agree with the town, and we're going to help build it if it's needed.
Okay, so if it's not needed, there will be no cost, but there might be cost because we have to secure the land just in case it's needed. Is that what this is talking about?
So we plan to do all of the system modeling here within 2020. That is still within engineering's budget. And so it should come out over the next 9 months or so by the end of the year to determine those exact timelines and needs.
So what's the cost if it's not needed?
So as Eric mentioned, in his previous conversation, Windsor's not going to stop growing or anytime soon. And so it's really not it being not needed. It's more like when it's needed. And so right now, the price per acre is agreed upon. And so we hope to basically secure that as needed for when it is set to be built in the future. So that I hope that, sorry if that doesn't answer your question exactly, but we would secure whatever land is needed at that pro rata share as soon as we understand the modeling and how much the town share would be.
So we have to secure the land in case it's needed.
Correct. We would try and do that together though as like a bundled package. But yes, there's a chance that there might be a separation between the town getting their share of the land and then when that water tank is built, parsing that out with a different, time frame.
So, Mr. Baker, this is Shane Hale, town manager. If I can just add a little bit to this. So, I think that once we're done with the modeling, but between the system pressure needs in rain dance and just for a little bit of town extra capacity, our anticipation is that this water tower will be needed. There's a chance it wouldn't be, but I think that the anticipation from both Mr. Lynn's engineers and ours is saying that this is going to probably be a required infrastructure. So the whole idea with the acre is just if it's going to go on about an acre of land, there's a value to that. And so whatever the fair share of that land is should be directly proportional to whatever the fair share of the water tower is. So that way, Mr. Lynn isn't just being asked to give an acre of land for this. There's a value to that. But, if it turns out the rain dance, their system pressure needs is 75% and the town only needs it for 25% of our needs, then we're only paying that share of the land.
Okay, because he should be compensated for the land if it's something we need in the future.
Yeah, that's right. And again, we thought, and I appreciate Mr. Lind always being willing to work with this. We weren't really sure the value of that, and so we had offered just the price that we currently get cash in lieu for parkland. because we had that value established, and Mr. Lind was willing to work with us on that. So it's a pretty easy benchmark. It's amount of money. We'll take as cash in lieu. So that's how we ended up there.
Mr. Soslowski, you have a comment or question?
Yes, thank you. And it was really focusing around that same thing. Looking at the map, at least the page I've got in front of you, what is tract H then? It looks like it's not anything in this particular filing anyway.
So tract H is part of the major subdivision being part of that 616 acres. However, tract H is set aside for future multifamily development, whereas tract I in a few minutes we'll see is part of filing 9. So it's just kind of the larger build out.
Okay.
And then each of those tracts will be their own separate filings, like you see with 8 here, where there's improvement plans and things like that.
And I think, and back to that water tank, because it seems like it's a condition here, and yet obviously looking at the layout that we have on the screen right now, you're suggesting the water tank may not necessarily be in this area, not in filing 8, but somewhere in this vicinity. Is that
correct? So the engineers on both the town side as well as the rain dance team have not pinpointed an exact location yet. That is still to be determined.
I thought I heard you say that this was supposed to be completed by 2022.
Correct, the water tank is. And so there's still lots of development happening up here. And so it should be done here pretty soon, but it's just got to get finalized where they want that acre. They have a pretty good idea of it. And John Meyer with TSD, if he has a little bit more inkling on exactly where it will land, it just hasn't been finalized as far as how to, subdivide that particular piece of land out yet.
So I think Mr. Baker, sorry.
This is Martin Lind again. If you would pull up the page that shows the overall rain dance master plan. David Eisenbaum, can you pull up there we go. So if you look over there where the word New Liberty, there you go. Where New Liberty leaves Pelican Hills and just enters in rain dance at the very top of the hill. That's where Windsor's water facilities are, right there. We expect that tower to be in that region right up there.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And because I wondered it sounded, to Mr. Baker's question, it sounded like this was just a maybe if needed. But if it's got to be, the agreement says it's going to be built by 2022, it's going to be there. And obviously, but it's going to need a lot of other infrastructure, right? Pipelines, good sized pipelines running to, from, pumps, et cetera. So
that's why we picked that location with the town engineers. That's the location that they picked as well. And David, if you have a mouse, could you move it around until I tell you exactly where it is on that map, just so everybody's clear?
Are you able to see my mouse?
Further to the east, more east. Keep going, right in that area, right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's where the town of Windsor underground tanks are right now.
So we're making this a condition on filing 8 just because we thought of it now. Obviously, it's not within this filing or near it, for that matter.
Sure, and apologies with having only been with the town for a few months. I'm not sure why filing 8 was that trigger point necessarily. I know it's also, as you'll see in a few minutes, it'll be a part of filing 9, saying if it's not done with 8, based on timing, all those sort of things, that it would need to be done with by filing 9 as well. So there is some leeway.
Mr. Lind, you're all dual tap up there too, right?
Yep, it is. And also, we as the developer just see this as an off-site condition, not much different than an off-site sewer traffic issue. And so that's why it's not technically in the filing. It's just a condition of the filing. So we're comfortable with this.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bennett, you have a comment or question?
Yes, thank you. Water tower makes a lot of sense, but could you clarify for me, what's the source of the water that would go in there? Who owns it? And is it pot or non-pot?
John Thornhill, are you on that? You could clarify if there's any distinction other than it is obviously going to be a town asset, so we'll own it, maintain it, all that sort of thing. But I'm not exactly certain on if it's all, just potable water.
It is. This is Shane Hale. This is a potable water source, and so it would be filled up with the town's three service providers right now. So it no different than any other storage tank.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Jones, do you have a comment or question? Make sure you unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, where would we anticipate this tank? What other parts of town would we anticipate it serving beside Rain Dance?
So again, the location of it would be kind of on the very far east side where the cursor is, somewhere in that general area on the north side of New Liberty. As far as all that it will serve, so in addition to the Rain Dance, it will serve basically kind of what's known as the town's south pressure zone, but to what extent is part of the reason we're doing the modeling, so we can understand kind of what that split is between Rain Dance and the town and how far out that it will serve the town. So those details are going to be kind of fleshed out over the coming months.
Okay, thank you.
See anything else? Anybody else?
Mr. Sislowski, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, sorry, kind of, again, a bit unrelated, but one of the things we've tried to do across the board now is keep an eye toward pathways, and making sure that we're linking our various neighborhoods to a system of trails that will allow people to get around all of Windsor. I assume that that's planned in somewhere in this.
It is, yes. So Covered Bridge Parkway, that is ultimately the spine through Rain Dance, has a trail on the west side of it. So that will connect, Colorado Boulevard all the way down south, as well as there's a trail that's part of the regional trail that's running along Colorado Boulevard. So, and Tract H will be that ultimate kind of connecting piece.
Okay. Any final questions from town board?
Mr. Wilson, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, just thank you, Shane, for some of these questions people are asking. I emailed Shane today, and I think we all had some very similar questions, so I appreciate that, and we'll see how this shakes out, but I'm glad we're looking forward and planning ahead to get this done. Just one comment to follow on with Mr. Sislowski in regards to the trail system is, these next two filings are going to kind of tie in with Cherry Blossom, which goes into High Point Estates, and we're already linking up with Steeplechase. So some of these regional trails or connector trails, eventually what it should allow is some of those other Windsor neighborhoods on the west side of Colorado Boulevard, kind of getting access to the trails because there's no sidewalk along Colorado Boulevard, and so it should allow those folks to eventually get down to the river. So that's just an added benefit.
Correct.
And something people have been asking for a long time.
Any other questions from town board members? Do we have any public on? This is public comment to
give public comment.
There are no public in attendance.
We have no public in attendance, no public comment. Are there any final questions before I ask for the motion to close public hearing? Okay, we are not seeing any, so is there a motion to close public hearing?
So moved, Madam Mayor. This is Paul Redmeyer. I move that we close the public hearing.
Sislowski, second.
Okay, a motion on the floor from Mr. Redmeyer, the second from Mr. Sislowski to close public hearing. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is now closed. We'll move on to item 2, resolution number 2020-27. A resolution approving a final major subdivision, Rain Dance subdivision, 8th filing, David Nelson, Martin Lynn, the owners, applicants, and Tom Siegel, the applicant's representative. Quasi judicial, and Mr. Eisenbraun, do you have any additional information or anything else you wish to give us?
I do not. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Town board, is there anything further you needed to ask or further comments? Okay, we're not seeing any, so is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, this is Paul Rennemeyer on the Windsor Town Board. I move that we approve resolution number 2020-27.
Is it?
Ken Bennett, I second that nomination or recommendation.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett to approve resolution number 2020-27. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So the resolution carries unanimously. Moving on to item 3, a public hearing for a final major subdivision, Rain Dance subdivision, 9th filing, David Nelson, Martin Lind, the owners, applicants, and Tom Siegel, the applicant's representative. Quasi judicial, we'll see presentation from David Eisenbraun, senior planner for the town again, but first I need a motion to open public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we open public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second, Sislowski.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Sislowski to open public hearing. All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is now opened.
Well, good evening again, David Eisenbraun with the town. Tonight we have part 2 of 2 in front of us, which is the Rain Dance 9th filing. Again, this is a presentation from the Rain Dance team. And so again, with subdivisions and major subdivisions, we're in front of you all tonight again because we're dividing land into 6 or more parcels outlined in our municipal code. Again, the site vicinity map is similar to what you all saw in the 8th. So the site is, again, north of New Liberty Road and east of Colorado Boulevard or Weld County Road 13. And is also falls entirely within the Rain Dance planned unit development area. So Rain Dance filing 9th is kind of that most northwestern portion of the Rain Dance master plan and continues to build on the spine of Covered Bridge Parkway and adjoins the 8th filing like we had just seen. And ultimately is kind of that northwestern piece. So the overall plat characteristics is it is a little bit smaller in some ways than the 8th, being only 108 acres. However, it is a bit larger from the developed aspect with about 73.5 acres being developed. Overall, the density is very similar to the 8th, being 3.2 dwelling units per acre and 239 homes, 122 of those being the 5,500 square foot lots and 117 being the 6,600 square foot lots. Again, these are all 1- and 2-story homes with attached garages, but like 8th, they are all detached single-family product types. The landscaping and overall improvements for the 9th filing is again similar to the rest of the Rain Dance development. We're seeing these themes of large open agricultural uses and open spaces. This filing has about 17 acres of those. And similar to the 8th, its proximity to the 2nd filing park, 9th did not have to really add many pocket parks. However, they did add a small pocket park at location C. So that's right along Covered Bridge Parkway and provides kind of a nice central amenity, not only for the 9th filing, but the future filings to the east of it or on the northeast side there of Covered Bridge Parkway. Again, the 9th filing is consistent with our goals in the comprehensive plan, both the growth framework and 5B, maintaining the character of the community while accommodating future growth that's fiscally and environmentally feasible, as well as 5C, the residential areas framework, which supports diverse housing and residential neighborhoods to meet the needs of varying family sizes, lifestyles, and income levels. Similar to the 8th, a neighborhood meeting was held back in December of 2019. Notifications for this final major subdivision. The developer did send out certified letters to the adjacent property owners on March 19th, highlighted in yellow there. And then on March 20th, the town did post the notice to their website, as well as posted the physical property and displayed the ad in the Greeley Tribune. One point of clarification on both the 8th and the 9th, as you see, we did go above and beyond based on the lack of development, especially within rain dance, but also the distances out here. And so we wanted to make sure to cover all of the neighborhoods, the HOAs and the metro districts of the sort on the west side of County Road Weld County Road 13 to assure that people were properly notified and that they did go above and beyond our code requirements. So similar to the 8th, again, I can summarize these. The developer shall dedicate the right-of-way and easements on the east side of Colorado Boulevard sufficient for the potential construction of a future two-lane roundabout at the intersection of Colorado Boulevard and Pear Blossom, so just north of Cherry Blossom. And then again, the same, if not already completed as part of the 8th filing, the developer shall work with staff and prepare this elevated water tank design through a collaborative process. Again, if not completed with the 8th, the developer shall convey the necessary tract of land near the highest elevation on the north side of New Liberty for the construction of the elevated water tank. If not completed with the 8th, the town agrees to pay the developer its pro rata share of the water tower construction and the land of the $58,788 in exchange for the dedication of that land. If not completed with the 8th, the developer shall construct the water tank by the end of 2022, unless there's considerable economic faults due to acts outside the town or developer's control. And then again, the town shall reimburse the developer its pro rata share within 30 days of construction acceptance of that water tower. And again, those need to be determined based on the water system designs. And then lastly, the dedication of the water tower and any real property to the town. Ownership and maintenance responsibilities lie solely with the town. And so any proposed exclusive rights to the water tower by the developer are postponed until at such a time when the design of the tower and any additional marketing or telecommunication uses associated with it are brought back to the town in writing. So with that, staff recommends that the town board approve the final major subdivision as presented, subject to all remaining town board and staff comments and conditions being addressed. And ultimately, staff requests that the following be entered into the record: application and supplemental materials, staff memo and supporting documents, testimony received during the public hearing, and finally approval of the major subdivision. And we did use, obviously the same criteria with the previous major subdivision. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Okay, any questions under this public hearing?
Mr. Baker, you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Miles Baker. I want to thank the developer for expanding the neighborhood notification. I think that's great to get the notice out there, and I appreciate them going above the code requirement. My question is, and I think when you showed those little pop-up ABC boxes there, I just wanted clarification that there's still going to be agricultural mini farming on those A and B along Colorado Boulevard. That was talked about so long ago.
Yes, so the idea is to still have kind of those agricultural uses, kind of those orchards and those areas for kind of community farms. Those are happening along, A and B with Colorado Boulevard, as well as some of the other internal main streets as well.
Baker, I can opine just a hair on that. We're doing larger farming parcels along crossroads, and what we're doing along Colorado Boulevard are more boutique, more orchards, more intense areas, not so much the big tractor areas, if you will. But yeah, we're preserving that same agricultural theme all the way through and in the parks. Each one of our parks has orchards in it. So hopefully when this all works, someone takes their grandkid swinging, they can pick an apple while they're there.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Dr. Jones, you have a comment or question?
Yeah, just getting back to the water tank for a moment. When we say elevated water tank, are we talking like a Greeley or a Walmart elevated water tank, or do we have any idea what it might look like right now?
I won't profess to be a water expert or engineer in this regard. John Meyer with TST or Shane or John Thornhill, if you all have any kind of more detailed thoughts on the size of this. You know, we have projected gallon amounts, but as far as height goes, I'll leave that up to others.
Hello, Town Board. This is John Myers with TST Consulting, applicant's engineer. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
The water tank, most likely, we're thinking would be between 400,000 and 500,000 gallons. The Walmart tanks are about 2 million, to give you an idea on size. At 400,000 or 500,000 gallons, it doesn't need to be the concrete base with the big disc on top. It could be a smaller standpipe with a spheroid, so it'd be more like a ball on top. That's the current idea of approximately what it would be. In the location that it's needed to obtain the pressure that we need by gravity and have no pumping necessary, it would need to be between 130 and 160 feet tall. So approximately the same as the other tanks that you referred to. To add some clarity to the tanks, since it's been a topic of discussion, the town has a closed loop pump station that exists currently. You guys built it over a decade ago. It consists of 2 sets of pumps, each of which is completely capable of powering the entire south zone on its own. It has a backup diesel generator that would serve in the case of an emergency. The town's concern from the beginning of the rain dance project is that they wanted a fail-safe emergency measure so that if anything happened to the pump station, they would still be able to supply emergency services. The advantage of a tank is that it operates completely on gravity. Assuming that it has water in it, it does not need anything to operate other than its own self. The other advantage is that from an operations standpoint, it's much more efficient to operate a water tank because you only need a small pump to take the water up to the top of it versus the multiple large pumps that charge the system currently during peak hours. And that's the reason why we've arrived at the water tank that we have.
I thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? She's shaking her head. She's going to be calm.
Mr. Soslowski, you have a comment or question?
I do, thank you. Mr. Myers, where were you on the last hearing when we were talking about the water tank? Thanks for all that information.
I'm sorry.
That was excellent.
I unmuted a couple of times and I decided not to talk.
I did still have a question on the water tank though, and it really only goes to the condition of approval that says the developer shall construct the elevated water tank by the end of 2022. And I'm just curious if it includes the other necessary infrastructure and piping to actually connect that water tank to whatever pipes and pipelines it needs to be connected to. So I'm curious what the developer's responsibility is on that, or is it just the water tank, or is it actually to be tied in and functional?
The pipe that would theoretically fill the tank is already approved on the Rain Dance Major Infrastructure Plan set, which is currently under construction.
Okay.
Part of the reason for the site that we chose for the tank is that it's directly adjacent to the water line that is already planned and again under construction. So connecting the tower to the pipe is pretty, about as simple as it gets. And the way the tank would function is that the existing pump station that you already have would be used to fill the tank with no new pumps or anything needed. Again, subject to final design, there may be some things that we have to add, telemetry and whatnot, but otherwise it should be extremely straightforward.
So if I understood you, it is the developer's scope of work to not only build the tank, but connect it to that water line that they're installing.
That's my understanding of what has been agreed to date, yes.
Okay. And then just a quick question on the map. You had that, I think, a pocket park marked
Yes.
C on that earlier map. And I was looking at that, trying to figure out how people get to it, but maybe more importantly, and I'm trying to recall what our decision was on this, but who's got the maintenance responsibility on that park?
So that's all within the Rain Dance Metro District.
It is, okay.
And it's fully accessed by sidewalks and ADA accessible, all those sort of things.
Okay, excellent, thank you. That's it, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Do we see anybody else, Jessica?
No, ma'am.
Did we have any public join us? We are in the public hearing portion. No?
There's no public.
We have no public
No
at the,
further questions from town board? I would now seek a motion to close public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Who was the second? Was that you, Miles?
Yes, Miles.
Okay. I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mr. Baker to close the public hearing. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Public hearing is now closed. Moving on to our last item then, item 4, resolution number 2020-28. Resolution approving a final major subdivision, Rain Dance Subdivision 9 filing. David Nelson, Martin Lind, the owner applicant, and Tom Siegel, the applicant's representative. Quasi judicial, Mr. Eisenbraun, any additional information?
Nothing at this time. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions from town board? We're not seeing any. So does anybody want to make a motion to approve resolution 2020-28?
I move resolution 2020-28, Miles Baker.
Okay.
Soslowski, second.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Baker and a second from Mr. Soslowski, approving resolution number 2020-28. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The resolution carries unanimously. So thank you all for your patience this evening. Thank you for coming back so that we can do this and making sure that we met our public notice. So with that, I'm going to move down to item E, which is to adjourn. And I would seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Mr. Rennemeyer.
Second, Miles Baker.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mr. Baker to adjourn. All in favor signify by aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening and stay safe and be well.